Come with me as I look at this 500-year-old Tudor gem deep in the heart of Cheshire. Today I'm at Little Moreton Hall, also known as Old Moreton Hall, which is a moated, half-timbered manor house just southwest of Congleton deep in Cheshire. Originally built for the prosperous Cheshire landowner William Moreton around 1504 to 1508, the remainder of the house has been constructed over several hundreds of years through generations of the Moreton family up until around 1610. As we progress through this fabulous porchway going into the Elizabethan Courtyard, we can see just on the right doorway there we have the entrance to what would be the granary, and this is where they would store a lot of their grain and corn and stuff for creating food. And just on the right here we've got an entrance in the wall. Leave me a comment down below if you think you know what this could be. One of the first rooms you come across as you enter the courtyard is the chapel, and this is just to the right as you enter. And as you can see, this is an amazing example of a Tudor era chapel. So again, this is timber framed with wattle and daub walls, and we have a fabulous oak separating screen. As we look through, we can see what are known as tempera paintings on the walls, and these contain things such as the commandments and date back to around 1508. So incredible survivors of the period. We also have the stained glass window at the back of the room there, which was actually a 20th century addition. So this was installed by a Charles Abraham, who was the last private owner of Little Moreton Hall before it became part of the National Trust. However, it's still a magnificent example of stained glass, and I think it's very fitting in with the architecture of the building. Right next to the chapel we have another room, and today this is known as the exhibition room. However, William Moreton III used this as a bedroom up until the mid-17th century, where the rest of his family then decided to split the house into separate living areas. And if you look closely at the walls, you can also see burn marks which were there to ward off witchcraft. Moving on from the exhibition space, we have what is known as the withdrawing room, and this is part of the original structure that was built in the early 1500s. The purpose of the withdrawing room is to create a private family space, whilst the guest wing was set aside for visitors to have their own privacy. The creation of these separated private spaces indicates the changes that were happening in the post-medieval period, so these reflect the changes in society at the time of how people wanted their own private spaces to sit and converse with their family. Also in here we have a fine example of a fireplace which has the Elizabethan coat of arms from Elizabeth I. Moving through, we enter the magnificent Great Hall. So this dates back to the 1508 original build of William Moreton, who subsequently died in 1526. This is a cracking example of a Tudor style Great Hall, so obviously the wooden framed construction with the great big fireplace, which would have been the heart and soul of the ability to cook and warm the room up in the Tudor period. And on display we also have examples of what the food would have looked like back in that period. A doorway at the end of the Great Hall leads to what is known as the Little Parlour, and I think is the most magnificent room within the house. Originally this room was panelled with timbers from the Georgian period, however in 1976 during renovations the panels were taken off, and these amazing examples of Tudor artwork were uncovered underneath. The fact that we have the Moreton family's wolf head crest and the initials of JM actually suggests that the date of these paintings goes back to before John Moreton's death, which is around 1598. So a huge thanks to the Georgian Moretons who covered these up and protected them. It's worth pointing out as well that windows were a significant display of wealth and social status in Tudor times. So during the 16th century, glass was a luxury item which made the presence and size and quantity of the windows a clear indicator of a household's wealth, for which Little Moreton Hall is no exception. We now make our way upstairs, which is part of the guest wing of the building, so this is directly above the main porch as you enter over the moat. And just to the left we do have an example of a Tudor toilet just down this corridor, but we'll take a closer look very shortly. Over on the east side of the building we have this, which is the guest parlour, so this would have been a place where guests could sleep and spend some of their time in their private accommodation. So this houses a bed and also shows an example of what Tudor beds would have looked like, with this one being strung with ropes underneath to support the mattress. We also got an example of the conservation of how the building is being made structurally safe. But the bit you've probably been waiting for is the Tudor toilet, which is sat directly over the moat. So as you might expect, this is nothing more than just a hole sat directly above the water where guests and visitors would have just sat and let their business drop directly down into the water below. Now, running the entire length of the south range is the long gallery, which is roofed with heavy gritstone slabs, and the weight of these have caused the supporting floors to bow and buckle, hence why you kind of see the wonky nature of the building from the outside. It's worth noting the plaster depiction of fortune as well, where whoever cast this either intentionally or unintentionally did the N backwards. Due to the stresses of the excessive weight on the long gallery, the house has undergone various bits of renovation to make sure it's structurally safe, including things such as these metal bars which help bring the walls closer together and stop them bowing outwards even further. Similar to the other apotropaic marks that we find downstairs, we've got this hexagram above this doorway, and again this is to ward off any evil spirits and keep them at bay. This leads directly into the upper porch room, which apart from the little parlour is one of my favourite rooms, and that's because of this fireplace. And looking at this, you can probably see the fireplace looks extremely wonky. However, it is the room which is wonky, and the fireplace and the mantle is perfectly level. As previously mentioned, the National Trust do a lot of conservation on this house, and this model depicts the various stages of renovation that the house has gone through to make sure it stays safe. The floors on this level are made from lime ash plaster, which are pressed into a bedding of straw and oak laths, which would have offered some protection against the ever-present risk of fire in these Tudor buildings. And this is the prayer room, which once would have had a hole in the wall here, which would have overlooked directly down into the chapel. In a way, it's an absolute miracle that this house still exists, because the fortunes of the Moreton family actually declined significantly following the English Civil War. As key supporters of the royalist cause, they found themselves isolated in a community of parliamentarians, and subsequently the hall was requisitioned by the parliamentarians in 1643 and used as a place to store parliamentary soldiers. Following the Civil War, they petitioned for its reinstitution, and the family survived the Civil War. However, they were financially crippled. They tried to sell off their entire estate but could only dispose of several bits of land. William Moreton died in 1654 and left debts of £3,000 to £4,000, which in today's money is equivalent of £12 to £16 million. And this forced him and his heirs to remortgage what remained of their estate. As a result, by the late 1670s, the Moreton family no longer lived in the hall and found themselves renting it out to a series of tenant farmers. Thankfully, it is now in the ownership of the National Trust and is open to visitors for the large majority of the year.